The fluorescent lights in the South Side Chicago police precinct buzz overhead like angry wasps. It's 2 in the morning, and I can taste copper in my mouth from biting the inside of my cheek during the drive here. When Sergeant Miller called, his voice was careful, measured. "Miss Baker, we have your niece and nephew here. They're safe, but we need you to come down." I'd thrown on whatever clothes I could find and driven through the blizzard, gripping my steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. Cooper and Piper are here. They're safe. That's all that matters. But Miller doesn't lead me to the children. His hand on my elbow is firm, almost forceful, as he guides me past the waiting area where I catch a glimpse of silver emergency blankets. He steers me into an interrogation room instead. The door closes with a click that sounds too final. Miller drops a plastic evidence bag on the metal table between us. Inside is a crumpled note, and even through the clouded plastic, I can see my name scrawled across it in Sloane's handwriting. "Miss Baker." Miller's voice has lost all warmth. "Can you explain why a wealthy Lincoln Park architect would send 2 small children to a frozen industrial wasteland in the middle of a blizzard?" The words hit me like a fist to the stomach. "What? I didn't—" "Child abandonment is a felony in Illinois." He leans forward, and I can smell the coffee on his breath. "Child trafficking carries even heavier penalties. You want to start explaining?" My hands shake. This isn't real. This can't be happening. There's been a mistake, I say, but my voice comes out strangled. "I live at 2400 North Clark, Lincoln Park. The children, where were they found?" Miller's eyes don't leave my face. 2400 South Clark Street, an abandoned industrial park, during a blizzard warning, dressed in summer clothes. The difference hits me like ice water. North versus south. 1 letter. 2 completely different worlds. My address is tree-lined streets and boutique coffee shops. South Clark at that number is warehouses and broken streetlights and nowhere a child should ever be, especially not at night, especially not in January. I have to stop, breathe. I told my sister no. I sent her an email. I have proof. Miller crosses his arms. "People send emails to cover their tracks all the time, Miss Baker. You'd be surprised how often we see that. 12 hours ago, I was at my drafting table, racing against a deadline that could make or break my career. The city park bid. 3 years of work, compressed into one final presentation due Monday morning. When Sloane called, I was eyebrow deep in elevation drawings. "Wren, thank God you answered." Her voice had that manic edge I've learned to recognize. "I need you to watch Cooper and Piper tonight. Preston surprised me with a trip to Aspen and we're leaving in 2 hours. I can't. I told you last week I have that deadline. This is important, Wren. Family is important." The familiar guilt tried to claw its way up my throat, but I'd swallowed it down. "I will not be home tonight. Do not bring them to my apartment. I will not answer the door." I'd hung up and immediately sent an email at 3:30 p.m., just to be clear, just to have it in writing. "I will not be home. Do not bring them. I will not open the door." Now Miller is watching me like I'm a liar, like I'm the kind of person who would endanger children. "The email could have been sent after the fact," he says. "Or you could have changed your mind and panicked when they didn't show up. Can I see them?" My voice cracks. "Please, I need to see that they're okay." Something shifts in Miller's expression. Maybe it's the desperation in my voice. Or maybe he's just giving me enough rope to hang myself. He stands up. "Follow me." I push back my chair and follow him down the hall to a darkened observation room. Through the one-way glass, I see them. Cooper is wrapped in one of those silver emergency blankets, the kind marathoners wear. He's shaking so hard I can see it from here, his whole body convulsing with cold or shock or both. Piper sits next to him, clutching her stuffed bear, and her eyes are vacant, empty, like she's somewhere else entirely, somewhere her mind had to go to survive what happened tonight. My knees buckle. I catch myself on the glass. That fog descends, the one that's been my companion for 28 years. The voice that whispers, "Fix this. Protect Sloane. Take the blame. You're the responsible one. That's your job." I could do it. I could tell Miller it was all a misunderstanding, that I'd meant to say yes, that the address confusion was an honest mistake. I could make this go away for everyone. Everyone except Cooper and Piper. The Uber driver, Miller says behind me, was told their father was waiting for them. She dropped them at the curb and drove away. I close my eyes. "You should thank God for Mr. Henderson." the night security guard at the industrial park. If he hadn't heard them banging on his booth, screaming for help. Miller pauses, lets the silence fill in what he's not saying. You'd be identifying bodies at the morgue right now, Miss Baker. 2 frozen children. The blood drains from my face so fast I have to grip the windowsill. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated. Sloane knew I said no. She read that email I checked, and the read receipt showed 3:47 p.m. She'd opened it, absorbed every word, and then she'd done this anyway. Punishment for daring to set a boundary. Punishment for choosing my career over her convenience. She'd sent them to die. I turned to face Miller. My hands are still shaking, but my voice is steady. I didn't call that Uber. I have the email I sent refusing to babysit. I have proof I told her no. I meet his eyes and don't look away, and I'm not covering for her this time. The words feel like stepping off a cliff. 28 years of conditioning, of being the good daughter, the reliable sister, the family fixer, all of it crumbles away. Miller studies my face for a long moment. Then he motions back toward the hallway. Let's go back to the table, Miss Baker. We'll start from the beginning. Miller's phone sits on the metal table between us like a grenade. You said you can prove you told her no. Let's see it. My fingers fumble with my phone, pulling up the email thread. The timestamp glares back at me. 3:30 p.m. Read receipt. 3:47 p.m. I slide the phone across to Miller, watching his eyes scan the words I'd typed 12 hours ago, back when I'd still believed a clear boundary might be enough. I need to make a call, I say. My voice sounds hollow. Declan, her husband, he's in Cleveland for a conference. He can verify I never agreed to this. Miller studies me for another long moment, then nods. FaceTime. I want to see his face when he answers. My hands shake as I dial. The phone rings once, twice. Then Declan's face fills the screen, the quiet hum of a hotel room behind him. He rubs his eyes, looking exhausted. Ren? His voice is rough with sleep. I just got into Cleveland. It's 3 a.m, what? Miller leans into the frame. Mr. Montgomery, this is Sergeant Miller, Chicago Police. I need you to verify something for me. Did your wife tell you that her sister agreed to watch your children tonight? Declan's face goes white. Actually white, like someone pulled a plug and drained all the blood out. Watch the kids? Ren's working tonight. She told Sloane she couldn't. He stops. I watch understanding crash over him like a wave. Where are Cooper and Piper? Safe, Miller says. Barely. They were dropped off at an abandoned industrial park on the south side during a blizzard. We found them at 2400 South Clark Street. South Clark? Declan's voice cracks. Ren lives on North Clark. How did... Another pause. Longer this time. When he speaks again, his voice is ice. I need to access my home security system. Ring camera. Give me 2 minutes. Miller and I sit in silence while Declan works. I can hear him typing, muttering under his breath, the fury building in each keystroke. Then my phone buzzes. A video file. Miller opens it on his department laptop. The timestamp reads 5 p.m. Our house. The front door. Sloane staggers into frame. A wine glass dangles from her left hand, the stem gripped so loosely it's a miracle it doesn't shatter on the floor. She's swaying, actually swaying, like a tree in high wind. Cooper appears, his voice small on the recording. Mommy, where's our coats? She doesn't answer, just pushes him toward the door with her free hand. Piper comes next, wearing a summer dress. A summer dress in January. Sloane shoves them both outside and the door slams. Not once does she look at her phone. Not once does she check the Uber destination. She sends her children into a blizzard in summer clothes and goes back inside for more wine. Miller's jaw tightens. I'll need that file sent to this email address. Already done, Declan says through the phone. His voice sounds like gravel. I'm getting on the next flight back. Don't let her anywhere near my kids. The call ends. Miller closes his laptop with a click that echoes in the small room. You're cleared, Miss Baker. I'll need your formal statement, but you're not being charged. He stands. Your sister, however, will be arrested for child endangerment the moment we locate her. The relief should feel bigger. Instead, it's just a small crack of light in a very dark room. 4 hours later, I'm sitting in the precinct's waiting area when they arrive. Preston and Lenore Baker sweep through the doors like they own the building, their designer luggage still tagged from the airport. They must have turned around mid-flight when Miller contacted them. They walk right past the room where their grandchildren are wrapped in blankets, still shaking. Walk right past them without a glance. Preston spots me and changes trajectory. Lenore follows, her heels clicking on the linoleum like a countdown. "Ren," Preston's voice is clipped. "We need to talk. Privately. I'm not leaving the children. The children are fine." Lenore's hand lands on my arm, perfectly manicured nails digging in just enough to hurt. "What we need to discuss is damage control. Do you have any idea what this will do to Preston's company stock if it hits the police blotter?" I stare at her. "Your grandchildren almost froze to death." "Don't be dramatic." Preston pulls out his checkbook. Right there in the police station, he pulls out his checkbook like we're at a country club settling a golf bet. He writes with smooth, practiced strokes, then slides the check across the table. $50,000. Made out to me, the memo line is blank. Consider it a gift. Preston says, tapping the paper. "An early birthday present, but gifts are for family members who support each other, Ren, not for those who cause scandals." He lowers his voice. "Tell the police it was a family miscommunication. You gave Sloan the wrong address by accident. Do that, and the check is yours." "No harm done," he adds. "No harm?" My voice comes out strangled. "Cooper was hypothermic. Piper won't speak. Ace." Lenore leans in close. The smell of her perfume makes my stomach turn. "This is what family does, Ren. We protect each other. You tell them it was a mistake, and this all goes away. Think of Sloan. Think of her reputation." Something inside me breaks. Not shatters, just quietly disconnects, like a rope that's been fraying for years, finally giving way. I pull out my phone and open the voice recording app. Then I slide it back into my pocket, still recording. "So, you want me to lie to the police?" I say clearly. "Tell them I gave Sloan the wrong address, in exchange for $50,000. Preston's face flushes. "Don't make this sound sordid. We're offering to forgive your student loans." "A gift in exchange for perjury." "Think about the family," Lenore hisses. "Think about everything we've done for you." I pick up the check. For a moment, I just look at it. A $50,000. My student debt, gone. The pressure, gone. All I have to do is lie. All I have to do is let them win one more time. I tear it in half. The sound is surprisingly loud in the quiet waiting area. Preston's face goes from red to purple. "I'm not covering for her anymore," I say. "Not for you. Not for anyone. You'll regret this." Preston's voice drops low. "Dangerous. You have no idea what you've just done." I know exactly what I've done. The precinct doors open again. Declan walks in, ignoring Preston and Lenore completely. He looks ragged, like he ran all the way from O'Hare, but he goes straight to the room where the children are, drops to his knees, and pulls them both into his arms. The first parent to prioritize them all night. Behind him, a woman in a charcoal suitcase enters. Elena Russo. The family law attorney I called 2 hours ago while sitting in this waiting area, watching my parents' true natures reveal themselves. Elena's eyes meet mine. She nods once. The war has started. But this time, I'm not fighting alone. In the morning, I'm staring at my phone when the first notification pops up. A Facebook tag, then another, then 5 more in rapid succession. My stomach drops before I even open them. Sloane's face fills my screen, makeup streaked artfully down her cheeks. The photo is professionally lit, like she waited for the golden hour to post her misery. The caption makes my hands shake. "When your own sister turns against you during the darkest moment of your life, I trusted her with my babies. I don't understand what went wrong. Praying for understanding and forgiveness." The comments are already piling up. Dozens of them. Hundreds. "Oh my God, Sloan, I'm so sorry. Family should stick together. This is awful. What kind of sister does this?" My phone rings. Aunt Carol. I silence it. It rings again. Uncle Jim. Then Cousin Beth. Then numbers I don't even recognize. I'm sitting on my apartment floor in yesterday's clothes, watching my entire extended family turn against me in real time, when my work phone buzzes. Marcus wants to see me. Now. The elevator ride to the senior partner's office feels like riding to my execution. I've worked at this firm for 6 years, clawed my way up from intern to associate. The city park bid was supposed to be my breakthrough, proof I could handle major projects. Now I'm about to lose everything because my sister is a monster, and my parents have money. Marcus's assistant won't meet my eyes as she waves me in. He's standing at his window overlooking the Chicago River, hands clasped behind his back. On his desk, I can see the glow of his laptop screen. Sit down, Ren. I sit. My throat is so tight I can barely swallow. Marcus turns around, and I brace for the words. We have to let you go. The firm's reputation. I'm sure you understand. Instead, he rotates his laptop to face me. The email is from Preston Baker. Subject line: Urgent matter regarding employee conduct. I skim it. Each word a fresh knife wound. Child endangerment. Police investigation. Unfit to represent the firm. The contract he's referencing, $2.3 million for a mixed-use development in Evanston, sits there like a threat. Keep Ren Baker employed, lose the contract. Mr. Baker sent this to me and the other 3 senior partners at 6:42 this morning, Marcus says. I can't breathe. This is it. 6 years, gone. I don't like bullies, Ren. My head snaps up. Marcus closes the laptop with a deliberate click. I've known Preston Baker for 15 years. He's a mediocre developer who inherited his father's company and has been coasting ever since. His contracts are never as valuable as he claims, and his threats are usually empty. The $2.3 million is actually $1.8 million, and we both know it. Marcus sits down across from me. More importantly, I called Sergeant Miller this morning. He told me what really happened. Showed me the ring footage. The relief hits so hard I have to grip the chair arms. You're not firing me? Firing you. Marcus actually laughs, but there's no humor in it. Ren, you just saved 2 children from freezing to death. Your sister belongs in jail, and your father belongs in the same cell for trying to cover it up. He leans forward. You have the firm's full support, whatever you need. Take paid leave if you need time to handle the legal battle. Use our attorneys if it helps. But you are not losing your job over this. Something cracks open in my chest. For the first time in 3 days, I can take a full breath. I don't know what to say. Say you'll bury them. Marcus's eyes are steel. People like your father think money makes them untouchable. Prove him wrong. When I leave his office 20 minutes later, I'm crying in the elevator. But these aren't tears of despair anymore. That evening, I'm at the hotel where Declan has set up temporary residence with Cooper and Piper. It's an extended stay place in Lincoln Park, close enough to my apartment that I can walk over, close enough that the kids don't feel completely uprooted. The room smells like pasta sauce. Declan is at the kitchenette, stirring a pot of spaghetti while Cooper sits at the small table, pencil moving carefully across paper. Aunt Ren! Piper crashes into my legs, and I scoop her up. She's warm and solid and alive. Hey, Butterfly. What are you drawing? Cooper's teaching me buildings. She wriggles down and drags me to the table. Cooper's sketch is surprisingly good. Clean lines, proper perspective. It's my apartment building, rendered in careful detail. This is amazing, Coop. He shrugs, but his ears turn pink. You made it look easy when you showed me your drawings. We eat dinner together. Real dinner, not the frozen meals I usually microwave. Declan made garlic bread. There's salad. Piper tells me about a butterfly she saw even though it's January and I'm pretty sure she imagined it. Cooper stays quiet but eats 3 helpings. It feels normal. Bizarrely, impossibly normal. After dinner, while Declan does dishes, Piper climbs into my lap on the couch. Aunt Ren? Her voice is small. Are you mad at Mommy? Every answer I could give feels like a landmine. I choose my words carefully. I'm sad she made choices that hurt you. Piper nods against my shoulder. She was drinking the special juice, the kind that makes her voice loud. Wine. She means wine. I close my eyes and hold her tighter. Cooper appears in the doorway, his sketchpad clutched to his chest. He's been so quiet since the police station, barely speaking above a whisper. I thought we were going to die in the snow. The words are flat, factual, worse than crying would be. Declan freezes at the sink, his back rigid. I kept telling Piper we'd be okay, but I didn't believe it. It was so cold. And there was nobody there, just empty buildings and snow. Cooper's knuckles are white around his sketch pad. I couldn't feel my fingers. Piper stopped crying, and I thought, I cross the room and pull him into my arms. He's 9 years old, and he shouldn't know what it feels like to think he's dying. You were so brave. I whisper into his hair. You kept your sister safe. You found help. You were so brave. I don't want to be brave. His voice cracks. I want to be a kid. Later, after both children are asleep in the bedroom, Declan and I sit in the dim kitchenette. He's drinking coffee even though it's nearly midnight. I'm drinking tea that's gone cold. I've been blind, he says finally. She's been drinking for years, hasn't she? I could lie. Protect Sloane one more time. But Cooper's words are still echoing in my head. I thought we were going to die. Yes, since before Piper was born. Declan's jaw tightens. You knew. I knew. I covered for her. I made excuses. The confession tastes like ash. I thought I was helping. I thought if I just supported her enough, loved her enough, she'd stop. We can't fix people who don't want to be fixed. The silence stretches between us, but it's not uncomfortable. We're both mourning the same thing, the family we thought we had. I'm filing for sole custody tomorrow, Declan says. My phone buzzes before I can respond. Elena Russo, texting at midnight. Sloane filed an emergency motion for immediate return of the children, hearing in 10 days. She's claiming you gave the driver the wrong address out of jealousy, and that Declan is guilty of parental kidnapping. I show Declan the message. His face goes carefully blank, the way it does when he's furious. Let her try, he says quietly. My phone buzzes again. This time it's a text from an unknown number, but I know who it is before I even read it. You started this war. We'll finish it. Preston. I look at Declan. He's staring at the bedroom door, where his children are finally sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. Are we ready for this? I ask. We're protecting the children. His voice is steady. Final. Whatever it takes. The next morning, Elena's office smells like old books and strong coffee. We sit in leather chairs that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and she's laying out her battle plan with the precision of a surgeon marking incision points. We're not going for the knockout in the preliminary hearing, she says, sliding a yellow legal pad across the desk. Her handwriting is sharp, angular. We're setting a trap. Declan leans forward. But we have the email, the ring footage. We can end this now. The footage shows negligence, maybe intoxication, Elena counters, tapping her pen against the pad. But a good lawyer and Preston will hire the best will argue it was a momentary lapse in judgment, not criminal intent. They'll plead for rehab and family therapy. You want that? No, I say instantly. Then we need her to lie, Elena says. If she testifies under oath that you agreed to watch them, and we prove she's lying, that destroys her credibility completely. It proves she's manipulative and unfit. That's how we get full custody, not just temporary. She looks between us. She'll feel confident, she'll double down. And when we prove she lied under oath in the custody trial, Judge Okonkwo will throw the book at her. Declan's jaw tightens. How long do we have to wait? 30 days after the preliminary. Court schedules are backed up. Elena closes the legal pad with a snap. Can you both hold your nerve that long? Kine. I think about Cooper's shaking hands, Piper's vacant stare through the police station glass. I think about Sloane's wine glass caught on camera, the way she shoved them out the door into a blizzard. Whatever it takes, I say. On the preliminary hearing, the Cook County Family Court is all dark wood paneling and fluorescent lighting, the kind of institutional space designed to make you feel small. The gallery benches are hard, unforgiving. I chose my outfit carefully this morning, a simple gray sweater, no jewelry, my hair pulled back. I want to look exhausted, defeated. It's not hard to fake. Sloane sweeps in 20 minutes before the hearing, wearing cream-colored wool and understated pearls. Her makeup is perfect, her expression carefully composed into wounded dignity. She doesn't look at me as she takes her seat at the plaintiff's table. Preston and Lenore claim the front row of the gallery like it's a box seat at the opera. Preston's suit probably costs more than my car payment. Lenore's perfume reaches me 3 rows back, something expensive and cloying. When Judge Patricia Okonkwo enters, we all rise. She's a tall black woman with silver-streaked hair and the kind of face that's seen every lie the legal system has to offer. Her eyes sweep the courtroom with the efficiency of someone who has no patience for games. "Be seated." Her voice cuts through the nervous shuffling. "Let's proceed." Sloane's attorney is a smooth-talking partner from some downtown firm Preston probably plays golf with. He calls Sloane to the stand, and she takes the oath with her hand on the Bible, her voice clear and steady. "Miss Baker Montgomery," the attorney begins, "can you tell the court what happened on the night of January 14th? Sloane dabs at her eyes with a tissue, though I notice they're dry. "I was supposed to leave for a business trip with my father. I'd arranged for my sister Wren to watch Cooper and Piper. She'd agreed to babysit." My fingernails dig into my palms. "How did you arrange this?" the attorney prompts. "We spoke on the phone that afternoon. She said yes, to send them over." Sloane's voice wavers, perfectly calibrated. "I gave the Uber driver her address 2400 North Clark Street, where Wren lives in Lincoln Park. I don't know how the children ended up on the south side. Perhaps the driver made a mistake. Perhaps there was confusion." Elena sits beside me, writing in her legal pad. She doesn't object, doesn't interrupt, just lets the lies stack up, like kindling, waiting for a match. "Are you certain your sister agreed to watch the children?" the attorney asks. "Absolutely certain. She said yes on the phone. I would never have sent them otherwise." The tissue comes up again. This time Sloane actually squeezes out a tear. "No further questions, Your Honor." Judge Okonkwo looks at Elena. "Cross-examination?" Elena rises slowly. She's wearing a charcoal suit that makes her look like a blade. "Just a few questions, Your Honor." She approaches the witness stand, and I can see Sloane's shoulders relax slightly. "This will be quick. Painless. Miss Baker Montgomery, you testified that your sister verbally agreed to babysit. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And you gave the driver her Lincoln Park address?" "Yes, 2400 North Clark." "You're certain she agreed? Under oath, you're testifying that Wren Baker told you yes?" Something flickers in Sloane's eyes. Uncertainty, maybe, or the first whisper of suspicion, but she's committed now. She can't back down in front of Preston and Lenore, in front of the judge. "Absolutely certain," she said yes. Elena nods slowly, like she's accepting this answer. "No further questions, Your Honor." That's it. No email, no ring footage, no dramatic reveal. Sloane's attorney looks confused, and I can see Preston lean forward, whispering something to Lenore. Judge Okonkwo reviews her notes. "This appears to be a family miscommunication that resulted in a dangerous situation. Miss Baker, I'm troubled that you didn't ensure clearer arrangements for the children's safety." The words land like stones. I force myself not to react. However, given the circumstances and the lack of clear evidence, I'm maintaining the status quo. Mr. Montgomery retains temporary custody. Miss Baker Montgomery, you're granted supervised visitation twice weekly, supervised by a court-appointed social worker. The gavel comes down. Next case. The courtroom empties into the marble hallway, and Sloane is immediately surrounded by Preston and Lenore. Their smiles are triumphant, vicious. Preston catches my eye as I pass. He steps deliberately into my path. "You should have taken the check, Wren." His voice is low, meant only for me. Family always wins. Lenore's hand touches my arm, her grip tight enough to bruise. "This isn't over, dear, but you've already lost." Sloane is performing for a small cluster of reporters who somehow got wind of the hearing. "I just want my babies back," she says, voice breaking. A mother's love never gives up. The cameras eat it up. I keep walking toward the parking garage, my footsteps echoing in the stairwell. Declan and Elena follow silently. We don't speak until we're inside Elena's car. Doors closed, engine running. Elena closes her leather notebook with a sharp snap. "She's on the record now," she says. "Every lie is documented, time-stamped, under oath." I stare at the concrete pillar in front of us. But we lost today. We let her think she won. Elena's smile is cold, predatory. Now we own her. Declan's hands grip the steering wheel. Understanding dawns across his face. She just committed perjury. "And in 30 days, Elena says, we prove it." The concrete pillar blurs as my eyes fill. Not with defeat, with something sharper, cleaner, hope. On the second confrontation, The courtroom feels smaller this time, more suffocating. Maybe it's the press packed into the gallery, their cameras clicking like hungry insects. Maybe it's the way Preston sits front and center, his charcoal suit pressed sharp enough to draw blood, that same smug smile playing at his lips. Sloane sweeps in wearing ivory, of course, ivory, the color of innocence, her hair styled in soft waves that frame her face. She clutches tissues in one hand like props in a play she's rehearsed too many times. The society page photographers eat it up. I can already see the headline, "Mother Fights for Her Children." I smooth my plain gray sweater and try not to feel small. Declan's hand finds mine under the table, just for a second. His palm is steady, warm. Elena sits beside us, her slim folder closed on the table in front of her. She looks almost bored, flipping through her phone while we wait for Judge Okonkwo to enter. All rise. The courtroom rustles to its feet. Judge Okonkwo's face is carved stone as she takes her seat, and I remember the way she'd looked at me during the preliminary hearing, like I was careless, irresponsible. A woman who couldn't even communicate properly with her own sister. Today, that's going to change. "Miss Russo," the judge says, "you may call your first witness." Elena stands, and there's something predatory in the way she moves. "Your Honor, I'd like to recall Sloane Baker Montgomery to the stand." Sloane's attorney objects, of course, but the judge waves him off. Sloane walks to the witness stand with her chin high, confident. She thinks this is just cleanup, a formality before her inevitable victory. The bailiff reminds her she's still under oath from her earlier testimony. "Mrs. Montgomery." Elena begins, her voice deceptively gentle. "During the preliminary hearing last month, you testified under oath about the events of January 14th. Is that correct?" "Yes." Sloane's voice is steady. "And you stated that your sister, Wren Baker, verbally agreed to babysit your children that evening, correct?" "That's right." Sloane glances at the jury, playing wounded. She said yes, and then she just wasn't there. "And you gave the Uber driver her address? 2400 North Clark Street?" "Of course I did." Sloane's confidence grows. "I would never send my children to the wrong place. I'm their mother." The courtroom murmurs its approval. Preston nods, satisfied. Elena turns to the screen, mounted beside the judge's bench. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter Exhibit A into evidence." The projector hums to life. An email fills the screen, and I watch Sloane's face drain of color as she reads her own name in the recipient line. From Wren Baker to Sloane Montgomery sent, January 14, 3:30 p.m. Subject, tonight. I will not be home. Do not bring them. I will not open the door. Read receipt. Open January 14, 3:47 p.m. The timestamp glows like an accusation. 6 hours before she sent those children into the blizzard, the courtroom erupts in whispers. Someone in the press section gasps audibly, "Mrs. Montgomery." Elena's voice cuts through the noise. "You opened this email at 3:47 p.m. You read it, and yet you testified under oath that your sister agreed to babysit. Which statement is true?" Sloane's mouth opens, closes. Her lawyer is on his feet, objecting, but Judge Okonkwo silences him with a look that could freeze fire. "Answer the question, Mrs. Montgomery." I forgot about the email. I thought." "You forgot an email you opened 6 hours before the incident?" Elena doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. An email that explicitly stated, in capital letters, that Miss Baker would not be home? The tissues in Sloane's hand are shredded now, little white flakes falling to the floor. "Let's move on," Elena says. "Your Honor, I'd like to play Exhibit B." The screen shifts to video footage. I recognize the angle immediately, the Ring camera from Sloane and Declan's front door. The timestamp reads 5 p.m. The Sloane on screen is nothing like the Sloane on the witness stand. Her hair is messy, her cashmere sweater askew. She's holding a wine glass in one hand, and when she moves, she sways. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. Cooper appears at her side, already wearing his jacket. "Mommy, where's our coats?" Sloane ignores him. She opens the door, the blizzard is visible even through the camera, snow driving sideways, and ushers both children outside. Piper is wearing a thin cotton dress amidst a blizzard. The gallery reacts with audible horror. I hear someone say, "Oh my God." Sloane never checks her phone, never confirms the address with the Uber driver idling at the curb. She just closes the door, wine glass still in hand, and the last image before the footage ends is Cooper's small face turning back toward the house, confused and frightened. Judge Okonkwo's expression has gone from stone to thunder. "Mrs. Montgomery," Elena says, and her voice is sharp enough to cut. "Were you intoxicated when you sent your children out into a blizzard warning, without proper winter clothing?" "I had 1 glass." "1 glass? The footage shows you holding wine at 5 p.m., hours before your scheduled flight. How many glasses had you consumed by that point?" Sloane's lawyer tries to object again. The judge overrules him without looking away from Sloane. "I don't remember exactly." "You don't remember?" Elena nods slowly. "Just like you didn't remember the email." My hands are clenched so tight my nails cut into my palms. Declan's breathing has gone shallow beside me. "Your Honor," Elena continues, "I have one final piece of evidence. Exhibit C." She presses play on the audio file, and Preston's voice fills the courtroom, crystal clear, unmistakable. "Consider it a gift, an early birthday present." My mother's voice follows, saccharine and poisonous. "Tell them you gave her the wrong address. These things happen." Preston again, "Do that, and the check is yours." The recording continues for 30 seconds. 30 seconds of my parents trying to buy my silence, to make me complicit in endangering their own grandchildren. Preston is on his feet, his face purple. "That recording is illegal. She didn't have permission." "Your conversation took place in a police station waiting area, Mr. Baker," Judge Okonkwo says, and her voice could shatter glass. "There is no reasonable expectation of privacy in a public municipal building. The recording is admissible. Sit down." He sits. The judge turns to Sloane. "And I've never seen anyone look so small on a witness stand. Mrs. Montgomery, you have committed perjury in my courtroom. You have demonstrated a pattern of reckless endangerment of your own children. You have shown a willingness to lie under oath to obtain custody of children you nearly killed through negligence." She pauses, and the silence is deafening. "Bailiff, detain the witness." Sloane screams, actually screams, a high-pitched wail that echoes off the wood-paneled walls. Her lawyer is protesting, but 2 bailiffs are already moving toward the witness stand. "Your Honor, please. You will be charged with perjury, child endangerment, and reckless conduct." Judge Okonkwo continues, her voice cutting through Sloane's sobs. "You have betrayed every trust placed in you as a mother and as an officer of this court." The bailiffs take Sloane by the arms. Her mascara is running now, black streaks down her ivory dress. She's crying real tears, the kind that come from genuine fear rather than performance. The press is going wild, cameras flashing, voices shouting questions. Preston tries to stand, to say something, but Judge Okonkwo's glare pins him to his seat like a butterfly to cork. "As for the custody matter," the judge says, turning to her notes, "I am awarding sole legal and physical custody to Declan Montgomery, effective immediately. Sloane Montgomery's parental rights are terminated pending the outcome of her criminal trial." She looks at me, and for the first time, there's something almost kind in her expression. "Wren Baker is designated permanent emergency guardian, Mr. and Mrs. Preston Baker. Your visitation rights are suspended pending psychological evaluation. All court costs, and Miss Baker's legal fees, are the responsibility of Mrs. Sloane Montgomery." The gavel comes down like a gunshot. Sloane is let out in handcuffs, still crying, her perfect hair coming undone. Preston and Lenore sit frozen, their empire of control crumbling around them in real time. The press swarms them, microphones thrust forward, questions overlapping in a cacophony of scandal. Declan pulls Cooper and Piper close. They've been waiting in the hallway with a court advocate, but someone brings them in now, and Piper runs straight to her father's arms. "I'm crying. I can't help it." But these aren't tears of triumph, they're relief. Pure, overwhelming relief that it's finally over. Elena closes her folder with a quiet snap and gives me the smallest nod. Justice served. 3 years pass like water finding its level. The trees along Lincoln Park turn gold again, the 3rd autumn since that frozen night, and I'm standing in the crowd at Millennium Park watching Mayor Reyes cut the ribbon on the Safe Harbor Garden. The design won the city bid. My design, the one I almost sacrificed to answer Sloane's call that January night. Reporters cluster around the mayor, cameras flashing, but I'm watching the children streaming toward the play structures. The centerpiece is a climbing tower with protective netting, inspired by Cooper's hotel sketches during those first terrible days. Not a memorial, A sanctuary. Marcus claps me on the shoulder. Hell of a thing, Baker. Your name's going on a plaque. I shake my head, throat tight. The work speaks for itself. That evening, I stand in my kitchen chopping vegetables for Sunday dinner, while Cooper sketches elevation drawings at my table. He's 12 now, all gangly limbs and serious concentration. His pencil moves with the same precision I use on blueprints. Aunt Wren, how do you make the perspective lines converge without them looking wobbly? I lean over his shoulder, guiding his ruler placement. Anchor your vanishing point first. Everything else follows. The downstairs door opens and Piper barrels in, paint splattered across her art class smock. She's 9, no longer the hollow-eyed child from the police station. Her laughter fills the kitchen as she shows me her watercolor of the Chicago skyline. It's for your office, she announces. So you remember us when you're being important. Declan follows, carrying groceries for dinner. We live in a 2-flat now, separate apartments but shared meals, shared lives, not romance, something better. Family built on choice rather than blood. Later, Cooper's middle school graduation ceremony fills the auditorium with proud parents and restless siblings. I sit between Declan and Marcus, watching Cooper take the stage as valedictorian. His suit is slightly too big, bought with room to grow, and his hands shake holding his speech. Real family, he says, voice cracking then steadying, are the people who show up when you're scared. His eyes find mine in the crowd. I'm crying before I can stop myself, and Declan squeezes my hand. The standing ovation thunders through the auditorium. Cooper grins, embarrassed and proud, and I think about the shivering boy in the silver blanket, how far we've traveled from that frozen night. My journal entry that night is short. I used to think love meant accepting everything. Now I know love requires boundaries. The next afternoon, Cooper sprawls on my couch, troubled. My friend Jake, his mom keeps borrowing money from him, like his birthday money, his summer job savings. Is that normal? I set down my coffee carefully. What does Jake say about it? He feels guilty saying no. She's his mom. The familiar trap. I recognize it like my own reflection. You can love someone and still protect yourself, Cooper. Those two things aren't opposites. He considers this, then nods slowly. The lesson landing. The cycle breaking. I never responded to Preston and Lenore's letters. They arrived monthly at first, then quarterly, then stopped. Peace found me in distance, not reconciliation. Some relationships don't heal, they just end. The news about Sloan reaches me through Elena's network, remarried to Dr. Brandon Wells, a Connecticut surgeon, a new baby Emma, a fresh start built on hidden truths. Until the baby fell from a changing table. A minor bump, a precautionary hospital visit, a routine background check. The CPS flag appeared like a ghost. Termination of parental rights, severe neglect, Illinois 2022. Elena called to tell me, Wells' parents have emergency custody, he's filing for divorce, the past doesn't stay buried, Wren. I feel nothing, not satisfaction, not pity, just the clean emptiness of a closed chapter. The evening of Cooper's graduation, the three of us stand on my balcony watching the sun set over Chicago. The skyline glows copper and gold, the same colors as the autumn leaves in the park we built together. Cooper suddenly wraps his arms around me, tall enough now that his chin reaches my shoulder. Thanks for not taking the money, he whispers. My chest tightens. Thanks for being brave enough to tell the truth. Declan's arm comes around both of us, solid and sure. We built something better than what broke. The city spreads below us, millions of lights beginning to flicker on as darkness falls. Somewhere in that vast sprawl are other families making impossible choices, setting necessary boundaries, choosing safety over silence. Laughter drifts up from the street below. Piper calls from inside, asking if we want hot chocolate. Cooper pulls away to help her, and I'm left standing with Declan watching our chosen family move through the warm light of home. This apartment, this life, this truth, better than blood, better than lies. The north side wind carries the scent of autumn and possibility. We've built our safe harbor, and it holds.
I am Cassidy, 33 years old, and at my father's will reading, sitting in a stuffy law office with 8 relatives. My mother laughed in my face. Your father left you nothing, she announced to the room, swirling her iced water like it was champagne. He hated you for 20 years, Cassidy. Just then, the lawyer pulled out a sealed brown envelope stamped with my dead father's name, read the first line silently, and slid it across the mahogany table directly toward me. I sat completely still. My Uncle Mitchell, who had not spoken to me in 13 years, leaned forward and whispered, "Open it, but not in front of her." Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the scapegoat in your own family, while the golden child got everything. You are going to want to see exactly what was inside that brown envelope. "Give it here, Cassidy, my mother," Catherine demanded. She extended a manicured hand across the table, her diamond rings catching the harsh fluorescent light of the boardroom. "Your father died absolutely bankrupt. It is probably just his unpaid medical bills or some overdue property taxes. Pass it over so Terrence can handle it with the actual estate." "Mr. Caldwell, take that back from her," Catherine snapped, glaring at the attorney when I did not immediately move. Thomas was not in his right mind during his final months. He was heavily medicated. Whatever he scribbled down or signed in secret is invalid. I am the executor of the main estate. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and looked at my mother with polite exhaustion. "Mrs. Catherine, as I just stated, this envelope was entrusted to my firm 10 years ago, long before your husband's illness. It is a separate directive entirely outside the purview of the main will. I am legally obligated to hand it directly to Cassidy." I looked at my mother, then at the thick brown envelope resting under my fingertips. Without a single word, I picked it up and slid it smoothly into my black leather designer bag. Terrence let out a loud theatrical sigh from his plush leather chair. He was my sister's husband, a towering African-American venture capitalist who treated every family gathering like a hostile corporate takeover. "Oh, let her keep it," Catherine Terrence sneered, adjusting his custom silk tie with a smug grin. "She wants to be dramatic over a dead man's trash. Let her have her little moment. It is literally all she is walking away with today anyway. The rest of the estate belongs to us." My older sister Melanie smiled, crossing her arms over her expensive cashmere sweater. "She is just mad because Dad could not afford to pay for her college. But he paid for my med school." Melanie complained loudly, grabbing her designer coat and ensuring the lawyer heard every word. "We all know she has been bitter ever since Dad co-signed the loan for my private clinic instead of helping her with her first apartment. It is just sad at this point. Honestly, Cassidy, just open it so we can all have a good laugh and go to lunch. Terrence made reservations at that new steakhouse and you are holding us up." I did not flinch. I did not mention that I had worked 3 grueling jobs to pay my own tuition while my parents handed her hundreds of thousands of dollars for a medical degree. She abandoned the second she married Terrence. I simply stood up, smoothing the front of my tailored suit, and looked around the room at the people who were supposed to be my family. "We are done here," I said quietly to Mr. Caldwell. Terrence chuckled, a low, grating sound. "Listen to her play the tough girl. Look, Cassidy, we know you are struggling. Consulting is a tough gig when you do not have a real network. Melanie and I can write you a check for $500 to cover your flight back home. Just leave the envelope. If it is debt, you cannot afford it. If it is garbage, you do not need it." I stared at Terrence. He thought I was a struggling consultant, barely making ends meet. My family had always viewed my independence as a failure because I refused to beg them for help. They had no idea I ran a highly successful crisis management firm, stepping in as a turnaround CEO for failing corporations. They saw my simple, unbranded clothing and assumed poverty, not realizing true wealth does not need to scream its name. "Keep your money, Terrence," I replied. "You might need it for your own ventures soon." His jaw tightened, a flash of genuine anger crossing his face before he masked it with that familiar, arrogant smirk. Melanie immediately jumped to her husband's defense. "You are so ungrateful, Cassidy. Terrence is offering you a handout, and you act like a brat. This is exactly why Dad cut you out. You never fit in with us. You never understood how to build a legacy." I glanced at Uncle Mitchell, who was quietly packing his briefcase. He gave me a barely perceptible nod toward the door. "Enjoy your legacy, Melanie," I said. I turned on my heel and walked out of the conference room, my heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. As the heavy oak door swung shut behind me, I could hear Catherine's shrill voice complaining to the lawyer about my disrespectful attitude and demanding to see the contents of my father's safety deposit boxes. The elevator ride down to the parking garage felt like an eternity. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my breathing steady. I navigated through the dimly lit concrete structure until I reached my rental car. I slid into the driver's seat and immediately hit the lock button. The silence of the car wrapped around me. My hands, which had been perfectly steady in front of my family, now shook slightly as I reached into my bag and pulled out the sealed brown envelope. The paper was heavy, the edges worn, and my father's uneven handwriting spelled out my name in thick black ink. I tore the seal. I reached inside and my fingers brushed against cold metal. I pulled out a sleek black USB drive. It was heavy encrypted, the exact kind of hardware I usually saw when dealing with high-level corporate espionage. But that was not all. I reached back into the envelope and pulled out a single piece of heavy cardstock. It was an official legal document dense with tiny print and stamped with the state seal. I smoothed it out against the steering wheel and read the header. Deed of assignment. My eyes scanned the dense paragraphs, my brain struggling to process the legal jargon until I reached the bottom line. The implications hit me with the force of a freight train. A sharp gasp escaped my lips, echoing loudly in the quiet car. Everything my family thought they knew, everything they thought they owned, was a complete lie. I grabbed my laptop from the passenger seat, flipping it open with shaking hands. The screen flared to life, casting a harsh blue glow across the dark interior of my rental car. I gripped the heavy black USB drive. It felt cold against my palm. I shoved it into the port. A security prompt immediately flashed on the screen, demanding a decryption key. My mind raced. What would my father use? I tried his anniversary. Incorrect. I tried Melanie's birthday, the golden child. Incorrect. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. Of course not. I typed in the date of the only day he ever stood up to my mother, the day he drove me to the airport when I left for Chicago with nothing but 2 suitcases. The screen flashed green. Access granted. Folders cascaded across my desktop, hundreds of them. I clicked on the master file labeled The Phoenix Holding Group. Spreadsheets, legal charters, and banking routes flooded my vision. I was staring at a labyrinth of corporate shell companies and offshore accounts. The numbers at the bottom of the ledgers were staggering. Millions upon millions of dollars completely untraceable to the main estate my mother had just inherited. A violent knock on my driver's side window made me scream. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart hammering in my throat. Standing in the dim light of the parking garage was my Uncle Mitchell. He looked over his shoulder toward the elevator banks, his face tight with urgency. He knocked again, harder this time. I hesitated, then hit the unlock button. Mitchell did not go to the driver's side. He hurried around the front of the car, yanked open the passenger door, and threw himself into the seat. Before I could say a word, he slammed the door shut and instantly hit the master lock button. Drive to the lower level, he ordered, his eyes darting around the concrete pillars. Get us out of sight from the lobby doors. I threw the car into drive and spiraled down into the darkest corner of the underground garage, cutting the engine behind a massive cement column. I turned to him, clutching the deed of assignment against my chest. What is going on, Mitchell? Why did you tell me to hide this? Mitchell let out a long, ragged breath. He looked older than his 60 years, the lines around his mouth carved deep by family secrets. Your father did not die broke, Cassidy. He died pretending to be broke to trap them. I stared at him, my mind struggling to process the words. Trap who? Mom. Mitchell scoffed, a bitter sound that echoed in the quiet car. Catherine, Melanie, and that slick talking fraud Terrence. Open the laptop, Cassidy. Look at the Phoenix Holding Group files. Look at the asset transfers from the last 24 months. I opened the laptop again. The blue light washed over Mitchell's grim face. I navigated to the folder he mentioned. Rows of massive wire transfers appeared, all siphoning money out of my parents' joint accounts and the family estate equity. Mitchell pointed a thick, calloused finger at the screen. 2 years ago, your father got sick. Catherine thought the medication made him weak. She thought his mind was slipping. So she and Terrence went to work. Terrence likes to parade around town as a high-rolling venture capitalist, but his flagship tech startup was hemorrhaging cash. He was millions in the red. Investors were threatening to sue him for fraud. Melanie was not helping. Your golden child sister was burning through $50,000 a month on luxury vacations, designer wardrobes, and keeping up appearances at the country club. My stomach churned. Melanie had just mocked me for being poor upstairs while she was secretly bankrupting her own husband. They needed cash fast. Mitchell continued, his voice dripping with disgust. So Catherine forged your father's signature on power of attorney documents. She secretly remortgaged the ancestral estate, the one she is living in right now, and funneled every single penny into Terrence's failing business to keep him out of federal prison. They sucked your father's visible estate completely dry. They thought they got away with it because they thought Richard was too sedated to notice the alerts from the bank. But he did notice, I whispered, staring at the staggering figures on the screen. Mitchell smiled, a cold, predatory expression that reminded me so much of my dad. Richard noticed everything. He played the fool. He let Catherine think she was the mastermind, but behind the scenes he reached out to me. We spent the last 2 years quietly liquidating his private assets, his stock options, his offshore accounts that Catherine knew nothing about. We moved all of it into a blind trust, the Phoenix Holding Group. He named it that for a reason, Cassidy. I looked down at the deed of assignment in my lap. The document named me as the sole owner and acting CEO of the trust. But why leave it to me? Why not just confront them? Because confronting them would have given them time to hide the money they stole, Mitchell said. Your father knew you were the only one in this family with the strategic mind to execute his final play. He knew you were not the struggling consultant Catherine thinks you are. He knew you built your own empire in Chicago. He needed a killer, Cassidy. He needed you. I looked back at the screen. The numbers were staggering, but something else caught my eye. The corporate structure of Phoenix Holding Group was not just a bank account. It was a lending firm. I clicked into the active accounts receivable ledger. Mitchell watched my face closely. Tap the screen. Cassidy, open the liability section of Terrence's corporate portfolio. I scrolled down, my pulse roaring in my ears. I opened the file marked Terrence Ventures, LLC. I scanned the list of their active corporate debt, the massive loans keeping his fake tech empire afloat, the mortgages tied to my mother's estate. I looked at the column listing the primary creditor. My breath caught in my throat. I blinked, sure I was misreading the legal text. I traced my finger across the glowing screen, reading the name of the entity that held the paper on every single thing my mother, my sister, and my brother-in-law owned. The primary creditor was the Phoenix Holding Group. I slowly turned to look at Mitchell. The silence in the car was deafening. He held my gaze, his eyes shining with a mixture of grief and fierce pride. They think they won today, Mitchell whispered, his voice trembling slightly. Catherine thinks she inherited a free and clear estate. Terrence thinks his debts are buried in anonymous corporate shell companies. They have no idea that the very ground they walk on, the walls they sleep inside, the cars they drive belong to the trust. I looked back at the screen, then down at the deed of assignment. The Phoenix Holding Group owned the mortgages. Phoenix Holding Group owned the business loans. And I owned Phoenix Holding Group. I did not just have my father's money. I had their entire financial existence resting in the palm of my hand. I owned them body and soul. A slow, dangerous smile spread across my face. I folded the deed of assignment back into the brown envelope and locked the USB drive securely in the hidden compartment of my bag. My father had played a magnificent game of chess from his deathbed, and now it was my turn to move the pieces. I started the engine of my rental car and pulled out of the underground garage, leaving Uncle Mitchell to make his own way back. I had a funeral reception to attend. The drive to the family estate in the affluent Chicago suburbs took less than an hour. Pulling through the wrought iron gates, I looked at the sprawling stone mansion. For 20 years, this house had been a monument to my mother's vanity. The perfectly manicured hedges, the sweeping circular driveway, the imported marble fountains. It all projected an image of untouchable wealth. But as I parked behind a line of luxury vehicles, the grand estate looked completely different to me. It no longer looked like an intimidating fortress of old money. It looked like a very expensive piece of collateral, and the deed to it was currently resting against my ribcage. I walked up the wide stone steps and reached for the heavy brass door handle, but the door swung open before I could touch it. My mother stood blocking the entryway. Catherine wore a custom black morning dress that looked more suited for a fashion runway than a wake. She held a crystal glass of sparkling water, her eyes sweeping over me with familiar disdain. The scent of expensive catered food and forced sympathy wafted out from the grand foyer behind her. "You can come in to eat, Cassidy," my mother said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper so the guests inside could not hear. "But do not think you are staying the weekend. I want you to go upstairs and pack up your old bedroom by tonight. I need your things out of this house." I paused on the threshold. My father was barely in the ground for 3 hours, and she was already erasing my physical footprint from the family home. "Why the sudden rush, Mother?" "Melanie and Terrence are moving their things in permanently," she replied, taking a delicate sip from her glass. "They are expanding the master suite, and your old room is going to be knocked through to create a walk-in closet for Melanie. It is long overdue. She needs the space for her new spring collection." The casual cruelty of her words washed over me, but the sting I used to feel was completely gone. I remembered being 15 years old when she took my private bathroom and converted it into storage for Melanie's beauty pageant gowns, telling me I should be grateful I even had a roof over my head. She had spent a lifetime making sure I knew I occupied the lowest rung on the family ladder. But standing there now, knowing I owned the very floorboards she was standing on, her arrogance was almost comical. I stepped past her, brushing my shoulder against hers, and walked into the crowded foyer. The reception was in full swing. Dozens of relatives and business associates murmured in hushed tones, holding plates of artisanal sandwiches and expensive cuts of meat. Before I could even reach the dining room, a tall figure stepped directly into my path. Terrence looked down at me, his tailored morning suit pulling tight across his broad shoulders. He held a leather-bound clipboard in one hand. He flashed a brilliant fake smile at a passing aunt, playing the role of the grieving, responsible son-in-law flawlessly. But the moment we were out of earshot, his expression hardened into a glare. "Glad you decided to show up, Cassidy," Terrence said, his tone dripping with condescension. "I was just talking to the caterer." He slapped the heavy clipboard directly against my chest, forcing me to grab it before it fell. I glanced down at the invoice attached to it. The total for the food and staff was exactly $4,000. "Since you did not get any inheritance today," Terrence continued, his voice loud enough for the nearest group of relatives to hear, "consider paying for the sandwiches your contribution to the family. It is the least you can do, considering Richard paid for your entire childhood. Melanie and I have taken care of the actual funeral costs, so do not say we never help you out." He crossed his arms, staring down at me with absolute certainty. He expected me to flush with embarrassment. He expected me to stammer about not having the funds to beg my mother for a pass in front of her high society friends. He wanted to humiliate me to assert his dominance as the new patriarch of the family now that my father was gone. He wanted everyone to see the struggling outcast daughter failing to pull her weight. I looked at the invoice, then looked back up at Terrence. I did not blink. I did not argue. I reached into my designer bag, sliding my hand right past the brown envelope that held the ruin of his entire life, and pulled out my wallet. I extracted a heavy matte black metal card. The Centurion card. The invitation-only American Express that required millions in annual spending just to maintain. I signaled the head caterer, who was hovering nervously near the kitchen door. He hurried over, eyes darting between me and Terrence. "Run it," I said, handing the metal card to the caterer. "Put a 20% tip on there for your staff. They have done a wonderful job today." The caterer took the heavy card, his eyes widening as he recognized what it was, and practically sprinted away to process the payment. Terrence stared at my hand, then at the retreating caterer. The smug satisfaction wiped completely off his face. He blinked rapidly, his mind scrambling to make sense of what he had just seen. "That is a dangerous game, Cassidy," he finally muttered, leaning in close so only I could hear. "Maxing out credit cards to save face at a funeral. You are going to be paying off those sandwiches for the next 5 years. You do not have that kind of capital." I slipped my wallet back into my bag and stepped closer to him. The music in the background seemed to fade away. The chatter of the guests became white noise. I looked him dead in the eye, dropping my voice to a sharp, icy whisper. "I have plenty of capital, Terrence, enough to buy and sell you 10 times over." I patted his arm, feeling the rigid tension in his muscles. "Enjoy the master suite expansion. You and Melanie deserve a nice big bedroom. Just make sure your property taxes are up to date." Terrence froze. The color drained from his face, leaving an ashen, sickly hue behind. His confident posture crumpled instantly. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He knew exactly what I meant. A man swimming in millions of dollars of fraudulent debt knows the exact status of his property taxes, and he knows that only the entity holding his loans would dare bring them up in casual conversation. I smiled warmly at him, turned my back, and walked toward the dining room to get a sandwich, leaving the new patriarch of the family suffocating in absolute terror. By Monday morning, the heavy scent of funeral lilies and the suffocating tension of my mother's estate were miles behind me. I stepped out of the private elevator and onto the top floor of the glittering glass high-rise that housed my crisis management firm in downtown Chicago. My family spent the last decade believing I was a struggling low-level consultant, scraping by on pity contracts. They pictured me working out of a cramped apartment, drowning in debt, forever jealous of Melanie and her successful venture capitalist husband. The reality was a stark contrast to their delusions. I was the founder and chief executive officer of one of the most ruthless turnaround firms in the Midwest. When massive corporations faced bankruptcy, hostile takeovers, or federal collapse, they called me to stop the bleeding. I commanded a team of 60 ruthless analysts and attorneys. I did not beg for a seat at the table. I owned the building. My executive assistant, Sarah, was waiting for me the second I walked through the double-glass doors. She matched my brisk pace as we walked down the sprawling corridor toward my corner office, handing me a freshly pressed espresso and a sleek silver tablet. "Welcome back, Cassidy," Sarah said, her voice strictly professional. "I am sorry for your loss. We handled the merger protocols while you were away, but there is an urgent flag on your personal portfolio. The Phoenix Holding Group accounts triggered an automated alert at 6 this morning." I stopped walking. The Phoenix Holding Group. The blind trust my father had secretly built and left entirely in my control. I pushed open the heavy oak door to my office, set my coffee on the massive marble desk, and took the tablet from Sarah. "Show me the alert," I instructed, sinking into my leather chair. Sarah tapped the screen, bringing up a complex financial ledger that projected directly onto the large, smart monitor mounted on my office wall. The numbers glowed in harsh red against the dark background. "It is Vanguard Tech Solutions," Sarah explained, pulling up the corporate profile. "The venture capital firm owned by your brother-in-law, Terrence. They hold a massive line of credit through Phoenix Holding Group secured against his business assets and your mother's primary residence. They just missed their monthly premium. And it is not just a late payment, Cassidy. Their corporate accounts are showing insufficient funds across the board. They are completely tapped out." I stared at the glowing red numbers on the screen. Terrence had stood in the foyer of my mother's house just 2 days ago, dripping with arrogance, mocking me for being poor. He had handed me a catering bill like I was a peasant begging for scraps, completely unaware that his own empire was running on fumes. Now the mask was slipping. "Pull up their raw transaction history for the last 90 days, I ordered, leaning closer to the screen. "I want to see exactly where the capital from our loans went." Terrence claimed he needed this money for server expansion and tech acquisition. "Find the leak." Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard. Within seconds, a new spreadsheet populated the monitor. It was a detailed breakdown of Vanguard Tech Solutions' outgoing wire transfers. I scanned the lines of data, my eyes narrowing as a glaring pattern emerged. The money was not going towards servers' payroll or tech acquisitions. The capital was bleeding out through a series of exorbitant consulting fees paid weekly to a third-party vendor. "Click on that vendor," I said, pointing at the screen. "Who owns that shell company?" Sarah ran the tax identification number through our database. Her eyebrows shot up in surprise. "It is registered to a Melanie Vanguard." A cold, humorless laugh escaped my throat. My sister. Melanie was supposedly the supportive, wealthy wife of a tech genius living a life of pure luxury. In reality, she was siphoning cash out of her husband's failing business to fund her own lifestyle. "Look at the itemized expenditures from her account," Sarah said, reading off the screen with a tone of utter disbelief. $50,000 wired to a luxury car dealership in Beverly Hills, $30,000 to a boutique designer in Paris, $15,000 spent at a private resort in the Maldives just last week. She is pulling capital directly from the business loans to fund personal shopping sprees. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the list of designer bags, luxury cars, and five-star vacations. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking, but it was not surprising. It triggered a memory so vivid, I could almost feel the phantom sting of it. I was 12 years old, saving every penny of my chore money in a small tin box hidden under my bed. I wanted to buy a second-hand laptop to learn coding. I had saved for 10 months. One afternoon, I came home from school to find the box empty. Melanie had taken the money to buy a designer prom dress. When I cried and begged our mother to make Melanie give it back, Catherine had simply rolled her eyes. "Melanie needs to look presentable for her social circles," Catherine had told me, brushing my tears away with cold annoyance. "You do not go to parties, Cassidy. You do not need the money. Let your sister shine." I looked at Sarah, my voice dropping to a harsh, steady cadence. "She is still stealing my allowance, Sarah. Only now the tin box under the bed is a multi-million-dollar corporate loan, and she is too stupid to realize she is spending my money again." Terrence was not just failing as a businessman. He was a coward, letting his spoiled wife cannibalize his company because he was too terrified to tell her they were actually broke. They had mortgaged my mother's house, the very roof over her head, just so Melanie could keep up appearances at the country club. The entire Golden Child empire was built on a foundation of rotting wood and stolen cash. And now I held the match. "Get Mr. Gallagher on the line," I commanded, referring to my ruthless head of legal. Sarah dialed the number and put the call on speakerphone. Gallagher answered immediately. "Good morning, Cassidy. What is the target today?" I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the bustling Chicago streets below. "I need you to draft a formal notice of default, Gallagher. Target is Vanguard Tech Solutions, owned by Terrence Vanguard. They have breached the terms of their master loan agreement with Phoenix Holding Group." "On what grounds are we accelerating the debt?" Gallagher asked, the sound of rapid typing echoing over the line. "Gross financial mismanagement, fraudulent allocation of funds, and breach of fiduciary duty," I replied smoothly. "He took our capital under the guise of business expansion and funneled it into his wife's personal luxury accounts. I want the notice of default drafted immediately. I want it hand-delivered by a process server directly to Terrence's glass-walled office so his entire staff can see it happen." "Understood," Gallagher said. "What is the cure window?" 48 hours, I said, my voice as hard as steel. "Give him exactly 48 hours to produce $2 million in liquid cash to bring the accounts current. If the money is not wired into the Phoenix Holding Group accounts, the second the deadline expires, we initiate immediate asset seizure." "And the primary collateral?" Gallagher asked. I smiled, thinking of my mother bragging about expanding her master suite. "The primary collateral is Catherine's estate. If Terrence cannot pay the $2 million, we foreclose on my mother's house. Execute the order." The line went dead. I set the phone face down on the cool marble surface of my desk. The sheer weight of what I had just set into motion settled over me, not as a burden, but as an armor I had spent my entire adult life forging. Outside my floor-to-ceiling windows, the Chicago skyline stretched out in a jagged horizon of glass and steel, completely indifferent to the financial execution I had just authorized. For a long moment, the only sound in the office was the low, steady hum of the climate control system. Then the silence shattered. My personal cell phone resting next to my keyboard began to vibrate violently against the desk. The screen lit up with a rapid succession of notifications. It was the family group chat, a thread I had kept muted for the better part of a decade. I only ever checked it out of morbid curiosity or to confirm the dates of mandatory holiday dinners I planned to avoid. Today, however, the digital barrage was impossible to ignore. I picked up the device. The messages were flooding in so fast the screen struggled to keep up. My mother was leading the charge, her digital voice carrying the same shrill, demanding tone she used in person. Terrence's business is under attack by some predatory lending firm. We need to pool our resources. Catherine had typed her message punctuated by blaring red alert emojis. I read the words twice, a cold smile touching the corners of my mouth. Predatory lending firm. Terrence had clearly sprinted home in a blind panic after the process server handed him the notice of default. He must have spun a frantic tale for my mother and Melanie, painting himself as the innocent victim of a ruthless corporate shark. He likely had not even realized yet who owned Phoenix Holding Group, or he was too terrified to admit to his wife and mother-in-law that the quiet, dismissed sister held the keys to their destruction. He was playing for time, begging for cash to plug a hole in a sinking ship. My phone buzzed again. Catherine had sent another block of text, this one aimed directly at me. Take out a loan against your 401k to help your brother-in-law. It's what family does. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of the demand left me momentarily speechless. For years, Catherine had refused to co-sign a simple student loan for my undergraduate degree, citing her need to maintain her own financial flexibility. I had worked night shifts scrubbing floors in a commercial bakery to pay my tuition. Yet now, without a second thought, she demanded I gut my own retirement savings to bail out a man who had mocked my supposed poverty just 48 hours earlier. She assumed I was a mid-level corporate drone, clinging to a meager 401k, and she viewed that imaginary safety net as rightfully hers to commandeer. I watched the typing bubbles appear and disappear as Melanie joined the chat, undoubtedly preparing to add her own layer of guilt and pressure. I did not wait for her message to land. I placed my thumbs over the keyboard and typed my response with deliberate surgical precision. I don't invest in sinking ships. I hit send. The group chat went dead. The rapid-fire typing bubbles vanished instantly. I could almost picture the scene in my mother's lavish living room. The stunned silence, the exchanging of outraged glances, the collective shock that the family scapegoat had dared to defy a direct order. 10 seconds later, my phone began to ring. The caller ID flashed Melanie's name. I swiped to accept the call and brought the phone to my ear, not saying a word. "You jealous, bitter spinster!" Melanie shrieked, her voice so loud I had to pull the phone an inch away from my head. "Who do you think you are talking to? Mom is in tears right now because of your selfish, disgusting attitude." I remained silent, letting her rage burn through the cellular connection. "You have always wanted to see us fail." Melanie spat, her breathing heavy and erratic. "You have always been obsessed with my life because yours is so pathetic. You sit in your tiny apartment in Chicago entirely alone, seething with envy because I have a successful husband and a beautiful home. You could not land a man like Terrence if you tried, so you want to watch him lose his company. You are a spiteful, lonely little girl." Her insults were a familiar script, a greatest hits compilation of every insecurity she had tried to project onto me since we were teenagers. She used to stand in the doorway of my bedroom, holding her designer shopping bags, mocking my discount store clothes, telling me I would never amount to anything more than a background character in her glamorous life. "Are you quite finished, Melanie?" I asked, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "Do not use that tone with me," she snapped. "Terrence is a genius. This is just a temporary cash flow issue caused by aggressive market fluctuations. He is going to bounce back from this predatory attack, and when he does, you will be cut out of this family forever. Do not ever ask us for a dime." I walked back to my desk, running my hand along the edge of the polished marble. "A genius doesn't leverage his mother-in-law's house to buy his wife designer bags, Melanie." The line went dead silent. Only the faint sound of her ragged breathing echoed through the speaker. "What did you just say?" She whispered, the venom in her voice suddenly replaced by a sharp, paralyzing fear. I know about the shell company, Melanie. I continued, my words dropping like stones into a glass bowl. I know about the $50,000 you wired to the Beverly Hills dealership. I know about the $30,000 you blew in Paris last month. You have been bleeding your husband's company dry to fund your shopping addiction, using capital secured by the roof over your mother's head. You did not just bankrupt your husband, you bankrupted your mother. Cassidy, how do you? Melanie stammered, her voice cracking. How could you possibly know about? I calmly hung up on Melanie, cutting off her panicked question mid-sentence. I did not need to hear her excuses. I did not need to listen to her beg. The time for talking had expired the moment my father signed that deed of assignment. I placed my cell phone back on the desk and reached for the multi-line corporate console. I pressed a button on my desk phone connecting directly to my legal department. Mr. Gallagher picked up on the first ring. Yes, Cassidy. I looked out at the city skyline, feeling the raw, undeniable power of absolute control. Freeze their corporate credit lines, I ordered, now. It took exactly 3 days for their absolute desperation to manifest into a public spectacle. Cut off from their corporate credit lines and bleeding cash by the hour, Terrence and Melanie did what cornered grifters always do. They threw a party. The invitations called it the Vanguard Innovation Gala, held at the most exclusive ballroom in downtown Chicago. It was a lavish, over-the-top charity event designed specifically to project a flawless illusion of untouchable wealth and philanthropic grace. The strategy was brutally transparent to anyone who knew how to read a balance sheet. They needed to dazzle new, unsuspecting angel investors and trap them into injecting fresh capital into the sinking ship of Vanguard Tech Solutions before my notice of default became public knowledge. They were trying to outrun a financial avalanche while wearing designer shoes. I decided to attend. I was not going to sit in my penthouse and wait for the legal clock to expire. I wanted a front row seat to their desperate performance. And more importantly, I wanted them to know exactly who was pulling the strings. I bypassed my usual understated, invisible business attire. For this night, I required armor. I stepped into a custom-tailored crimson silk gown that cost a cool $10,000. The fabric flowed around me like liquid fire, an unapologetic declaration of power. I paired it with diamond drop earrings I had purchased for myself after closing my first major corporate acquisition. My hair was styled in a sleek, immaculate blowout, and my makeup was sharp enough to cut glass. When my private driver pulled up to the velvet rope outside the ballroom, I did not just step out of the car, I descended upon the event. The ballroom was a masterpiece of financial delusion. Towering ice sculptures carved into corporate logos dominated the center of the room. Waiters in white gloves circulated with trays of vintage champagne and caviar. A string quartet played softly from a raised balcony. It was a staggering waste of capital for a company that could not even make its loan payments, but desperation breeds extravagance. I glided through the gilded doors, immediately commanding the attention of the room. Heads turned, whispers rippled through the crowd of high society elites and wealthy venture capitalists. They did not recognize me as the pathetic, struggling sister of the Vanguard family. They saw a woman radiating absolute authority and unbothered wealth. From across the room, I spotted my targets. Terrence was cornering a group of elderly, wealthy investors near the charity auction tables. Even from a distance, I could see the sheen of nervous sweat on his forehead. His usual smooth, booming laugh sounded strained and erratic as he practically begged them to look at his new prospectus. A few feet away, Melanie stood near the champagne tower. Her smile was completely brittle, her eyes darting nervously around the room. She was clutching her crystal flute so tightly, I expected the glass to shatter in her hand. Her perfect world was collapsing, and the strain was cracking her porcelain facade. Then I saw my mother. Catherine was patrolling the perimeter of the ballroom like a deeply insecure guard dog. She was scanning the crowd, ensuring the illusion of her family's superiority remained absolute and unchallenged. Her eyes swept over the entrance, glossed past me for a fraction of a second, and then snapped back with violent whiplash. I watched the color drain completely out of her face. For a moment, her brain seemed to short-circuit. She looked at the $10,000 crimson gown, the diamonds, the unapologetic posture of the daughter she had spent 33 years trying to crush into dust. Her shock quickly morphed into a familiar venomous rage. Catherine immediately flagged down two burly security guards stationed near the coat check. She pointed a sharp, trembling finger directly at me and began marching across the polished marble floor, the guards trailing closely behind her like obedient attack dogs. I did not move. I simply stood near a massive floral arrangement, took a slow sip of my sparkling water, and waited for the collision. "What are you doing here?" Catherine hissed, her voice dropping to a harsh, panicked whisper as she reached me. She positioned her body to block me from the view of the wealthy donors nearby. "I am just enjoying the ambiance, Mother," I replied, my voice perfectly level and calm. "The ice sculptures are a lovely touch for a company currently freezing to death." Catherine's eyes blazed with a frantic, unhinged fury. She signaled the two security guards to step closer, boxing me in against the floral display. "You are leaving right now," she commanded, her jaw tight with suppressed rage. "I will not let you do this. You always try to ruin your sister's big moments, just like you ruined her sweet 16. The sheer absurdity of the accusation hung in the air between us. It was her favorite historical grievance, a perfect encapsulation of her toxic parenting. I had been rushed to the emergency room with a ruptured appendix on the night of Melanie's sweet 16 party. My mother had spent the next 15 years telling everyone that my near-fatal medical emergency was just a calculated, selfish stunt to draw attention away from Melanie's custom ice sculpture. In Catherine's twisted reality, my pain was always an inconvenience to her golden child's glory. "I am not a sick teenager anymore, Mother," I said smoothly, shifting my weight and looking down at her. "And you do not get to dictate where I stand." Catherine turned to the security guards, her voice trembling with aggressive authority. "Grab her arms and escort her out the service elevator immediately. She is a trespasser. She is trying to disrupt a private charity event. Get her out of my sight." The two massive guards stepped forward, raising their hands to grab my shoulders. I did not flinch. I did not step back. "Wait, stop right there!" A panicked voice echoed over the music. A woman in a sharp tuxedo suit holding a clipboard sprinted across the marble floor, waving her arms frantically. It was the chief event organizer, her face pale with absolute terror, as she threw herself between me and the security guards. "Stand down immediately." The organizer ordered the guards, physically pushing their arms away from me. Catherine gasped in outrage. "Excuse me, I am the mother of the host. I gave you a direct order to remove this woman. She is not on the guest list." The event organizer turned to my mother, clutching her clipboard to her chest, her breathing heavy from sprinting across the ballroom. "Ma'am, you can't throw her out," the organizer said, her voice shaking with absolute certainty. "Ms. Cassidy is our platinum sponsor tonight. She funded this entire event." The mother's jaw drops. Catherine stood paralyzed. The muscles in her face went completely slack, her perfectly contoured expression melting into a mask of absolute, uncomprehending horror. The two massive security guards immediately dropped their hands and took a synchronized step backward, suddenly looking anywhere but at me. The event organizer stood trembling between us, her clipboard pressed against her chest, as if it could shield her from the radioactive tension radiating from my mother. For 33 years, Catherine had controlled the narrative. She had written the script where Melanie was the radiant star, and I was the unfortunate, embarrassing understudy. Hearing a stranger confirm that I was the financial architect of this entire lavish charade shattered her reality into pieces too small to glue back together. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a dry, raspy sound emerged. She looked at my diamonds, then at my gown, and finally at my eyes, searching for the struggling girl she had mocked. She found nothing but a predator looking back at her. "I suggest you return to the champagne tower, Mother," I said, my voice smooth and carrying effortlessly over the classical music playing from the balcony. "You look like you need a drink. And please do try the caviar. I paid a premium for it." Catherine took a shaky, involuntary step backward, retreating from me as if I had suddenly caught fire. She turned on her heel and practically fled toward the far side of the ballroom, nearly colliding with a waiter in her blind panic. The brief commotion had not gone unnoticed. From across the room, Terence had watched the exchange. He saw Catherine, his fiercely protective mother-in-law, retreat in visible defeat. He handed his half-empty glass to a passing waiter and began marching toward me, his heavy footsteps eating up the polished marble floor. Terence was a man who relied on physical intimidation. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried the aggressive, entitled swagger of a man who believed the world owed him its undivided attention. As he closed the distance between us, I could see the rigid tension in his jaw and the frantic darting movement of his eyes. He stopped just inches away from me, deliberately invading my personal space, trying to force me to step back and cede dominance. I planted my heels into the marble and held my ground, tilting my chin up to meet his glare. "I don't know who you're sleeping with to get this kind of money, but stay out of my business," Terence sneered, his voice dropping an octave into a harsh, threatening growl. He leaned in closer, his expensive cologne failing to mask the sour metallic scent of his nervous sweat. "You think showing up in a rented dress and throwing some cash at a charity event makes you a player? You are out of your depth, Cassidy. This is the major leagues. You are messing with corporate infrastructure you cannot possibly understand. Back off, or I will personally make sure you never work in this city again." His attempt at intimidation was so textbook it was almost boring. He was repeating the exact same aggressive posturing he had used at Thanksgiving 3 years ago, when he stood over the dinner table and loudly advised me to quit my silly consulting hobby and get a real job answering phones. He was still playing the role of the wealthy tech genius, putting the poor sister in her place. He had absolutely no idea that I held his financial autopsy in the palm of my hand. I did not flinch. I did not break eye contact. I maintained a cool, detached smile as I slowly unclasped my sleek metallic clutch. I reached inside and pulled out a single sheet of heavy bond paper, neatly folded in thirds. "I understand corporate infrastructure perfectly, Terence," I said, my tone conversational as if we were discussing the weather. "For instance, I understand the mechanics of Series B funding rounds. I also understand exactly what happens when a founder lies to secure that capital." I unfolded the document with a sharp snap and held it up just high enough for his eyes to focus on the bold red figures printed across the page. It was a synthesized internal audit of Vanguard Tech Solutions extracted by my crisis management team earlier that afternoon. "You inflated your user numbers by 300% to secure your last round of funding, Terence. That's wire fraud." I kept my voice pitched low, forcing him to strain to hear the words that were destroying his life. "You fabricated ghost accounts. You routed investor capital through offshore shell entities to artificially pump your daily active user metrics. You lied to the banks, you lied to your board, and you used the resulting fraudulent capital to secure the loan from my firm." I watched his eyes track the numbers on the page. His pupils dilated. The aggressive alpha male posture completely collapsed. His shoulders slumped, and the color drained from his face so rapidly he looked as though he might pass out right there on the ballroom floor. The arrogant tech CEO vanished, replaced by a terrified man staring at a prison sentence. "You do not just owe my firm $2 million by tomorrow morning," I continued, stepping into the space he had just retreated from. "You have defrauded federal banks across state lines to fund your wife's shopping addiction. Give me that," Terence hissed, snatching the paper from my hand with trembling fingers. He scanned the document frantically, his breathing turning into shallow, ragged gasps. "This is illegal. You cannot have this. These are protected internal metrics. How did you get this?" "When you default on a master loan agreement, the holding company gains immediate unrestricted access to all internal ledgers," I explained smoothly. "You signed the authorization yourself, Terence. You were just too arrogant to read the fine print." He crumpled the paper in his fist, his head swiveling erratically as he looked around the crowded, glittering room. The string quartet was still playing a lively Vivaldi piece. The wealthy guests were still laughing and sipping my champagne. No one had noticed that the host of the gala was actively hyperventilating. He looked like a trapped animal searching for an exit that did not exist. "Mr. Terence." The voice came from directly behind him, calm, authoritative, and completely devoid of warmth. Terrence spun around, dropping the crumpled paper onto the marble floor. Two men in dark, unwrinkled suits had materialized from the crowd. They did not have drinks in their hands. They were not smiling. They moved with the synchronized, deliberate purpose of federal agents who had already locked down the perimeter. The taller of the two men reached into his jacket pocket and casually flipped open a leather badge wallet, flashing a gold shield under the crystal chandeliers. "Mr. Terrence." The man repeated his tone perfectly flat. "We're from the SEC. We'd like a word." The champagne glass slipped from Terrence's hand, shattering against the marble floor. The sharp crack cut through the soft music of the string quartet, drawing the eyes of the surrounding high society guests. Terrence opened his mouth to speak, but his voice completely abandoned him. He looked at the two federal agents, then at the gold shield, and finally back at me. His arrogant swagger had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, terrified shell of a man. "Is there a private room where we can conduct this conversation, Mr. Terrence?" the second agent asked, stepping seamlessly to his left to block any potential exit. "Or would you prefer to discuss your inflated user metrics and offshore wire transfers right here in front of your prospective investors?" Terrence swallowed hard, his face glistening with a cold sweat. He gave a jerky, defeated nod and allowed the agents to flank him. As they escorted him away from the auction tables and out of the glittering ballroom, a shockwave of whispers rippled through the crowd. The wealthy donors who had been eager to write him checks just moments ago were now backing away as if he were contagious. Melanie let out a piercing, hysterical shriek from across the room, abandoning her champagne to chase after her husband and the federal agents. I stood my ground, my crimson silk gown catching the light of the crystal chandeliers. I smoothed an invisible crease from my dress and locked eyes with my mother. Catherine was frozen near the floral arrangement, her chest heaving. The realization of what I had done washed over her face. I had not just ruined their party. I had dismantled their entire fraudulent empire in under 5 minutes. I gave her a slow, cold smile, turned on my heel, and walked out the grand double doors. By Tuesday morning, the fallout was absolute. I sat behind my massive marble desk at the crisis management firm reviewing the final asset seizure documents for Vanguard Tech Solutions. The company was in freefall, and Terrence was drowning in federal legal fees. I expected Catherine to surrender. I expected her to realize she was outmatched and beg for a quiet settlement. I vastly underestimated my mother's capacity for venom. My private office line rang. I ignored it, focused on a corporate merger file. Then my personal cell phone buzzed. Then the office line rang again. Sarah walked into my office, her usual brisk, professional demeanor replaced by a look of deep concern. "Cassidy," Sarah said, gripping her silver tablet. "Your Aunt Patricia just called the main reception line. She was practically in tears. And then your cousin Gregory called. They both asked if we had staged an intervention yet." I set my pen down, my eyes narrowing. "An intervention for what exactly?" Sarah hesitated. "For your mental health." I leaned back in my leather chair, a cold knot forming in my stomach. "Play the voicemails," I ordered. Sarah tapped her screen. Aunt Patricia's frantic voice filled the room. "Sarah, please tell me Cassidy is safe. Catherine just called me weeping. She said Cassidy is having a severe psychotic break from the grief of losing her father. Catherine said Cassidy crashed Melanie's charity event screaming about imaginary bank fraud and had innocent people harassed. Catherine is terrified Cassidy might hurt herself or someone else. We need to get her committed to a psychiatric facility before she completely loses her mind." I stared at the glowing skyline outside my window. Catherine was not retreating. She was weaponizing my father's recent death to build a narrative of insanity. Instead of admitting her son-in-law was a federal criminal and she was a parasite, she was painting me as a hysterical, grieving spinster who had lost touch with reality. She was calling every extended family member and every high society contact in Chicago, spinning a web of lies to discredit the very source of their financial ruin. If I was insane, then my foreclosure on her estate and my exposure of Terrence were just the malicious, confused actions of a madwoman. My personal cell phone buzzed on the desk. The caller ID showed Uncle Mitchell, my father's older brother. He was the only person in the family who had ever seen through Catherine's flawless socialite facade. I picked up the phone. "Good morning, Uncle Mitchell," I said smoothly. "I assume you have spoken to my mother today." "Cassidy, you need to listen to me very carefully," Uncle Mitchell said, his voice grave and urgent. "I know exactly what Catherine is doing, and you cannot underestimate her. She has spent the last 4 hours calling every single person in our family directory. She is telling them you are having a mental breakdown. She is telling them you are hallucinating financial crimes and attacking Melanie out of unhinged jealousy." "I know," I replied, my voice hard. "She is trying to invalidate the foreclosure by destroying my credibility. It is worse than that," Uncle Mitchell warned, his tone dropping to a harsh whisper. "She is laying the groundwork to have you declared legally incompetent. If she succeeds, she can seize control of the Phoenix Holding Group Trust as your conservator. Do not brush this off, Cassidy. She did the exact same thing to your father when he tried to stop her gambling habits 10 years ago. She isolated him." The words hit me like a physical strike. 10 years ago, my father had briefly threatened to cut off Catherine's access to their primary accounts. Suddenly, rumors had swirled through our family that my father was suffering from early-onset dementia. Friends stopped visiting. Relatives stopped calling him for financial advice. Catherine had successfully quarantined him, crushing his resistance by making everyone believe his mind was failing. Now she was dusting off her favorite psychological weapon and aiming it directly at me. "I am not my father, Mitchell," I said, my grip tightening on the phone. "I own my narrative and I own the evidence. Let her talk. Her rumors cannot stop a federal indictment." "Just watch your back, Cassidy," he replied heavily. "She will not stop with the family. She will go after your livelihood next." I ended the call, my mind calculating the legal counteroffensive. I needed Gallagher to draft a cease and desist order for defamation immediately. I reached for my desk phone, but Sarah suddenly burst back through the heavy oak doors. She did not bother knocking. Her face was entirely drained of color. "Cassidy, we have a massive problem," Sarah said, her voice shaking as she rushed to my desk. She placed a printed email directly over the merger file I had been reviewing. It was a message from the board of directors at Sterling Global, our largest and most lucrative client. We were in the middle of negotiating a $30 million corporate turnaround contract with them. It was the crown jewel of my firm's portfolio. I scanned the heavy black text. "Dear Ms. Cassidy, effective immediately, Sterling Global is pausing all current negotiations and withdrawing our letter of intent regarding your firm's crisis management services. We have recently been made aware of highly concerning rumors regarding your current mental stability and erratic personal behavior. Given the sensitive nature of our corporate restructuring, we cannot entrust our financial future to an executive experiencing a documented psychological crisis." I stared at the printed words, the reality of the sabotage settling into my bones. Catherine was not just throwing a tantrum. She was calling my corporate partners. She was actively reaching into the highest echelons of the Chicago business world, using her country club connections to poison my professional reputation. My mother was trying to destroy my multi-million-dollar career to protect her stolen wealth. "Get Gallagher in here," I said, my voice dropping to a lethal, icy calm. "We are going to war." Gallagher materialized in my office within 60 seconds, a leather folio already in hand. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I handed him the printed email from Sterling Global. He scanned it, his jaw tightening. Catherine was not just throwing a tantrum. She was executing a calculated smear campaign, leveraging her country club gossip network to poison my professional standing. I instructed Gallagher to draft a cease and desist order so aggressively worded it would make Catherine's country club lawyers choke. But paper shields were not enough. I needed to control the narrative directly. I told Sarah to schedule an emergency video conference with the Sterling Global Board of Directors for noon. I spent the next 2 hours compiling a pristine, undeniable dossier. It included Terrence's fraudulent financial statements, the official SEC filing against Vanguard Tech Solutions, and the master loan agreement bearing my signature as the chief executive officer of Phoenix Holding Group. I was not going to defend my mental health. I was going to prove my ruthless competency. At noon, the massive screen in my boardroom flickered to life. 7 grim-faced Sterling Global executives stared back at me. They expected a hysterical, unstable woman. Instead, I gave them a masterclass in crisis management. I laid out the facts methodically. I explained that the rumors were a desperate retaliation from a defaulting debtor who happened to be related to me by marriage. I showed them the SEC filing. I showed them the money trail. I did not apologize for the family drama. I framed it as a testament to my unyielding professional integrity. I told them that if I was willing to completely dismantle my own brother-in-law for attempting to defraud my firm, they could rest assured I would protect Sterling Global's assets with the exact same merciless precision. I watched their expressions shift from skeptical concern to absolute silent respect. The chairman of the board actually smiled. The crisis was averted. The $30 million contract was secured. I ended the call feeling a surge of pure, unfiltered adrenaline. Before I could even close my laptop, the heavy oak doors of the boardroom burst open. Sarah stood panting in the doorway, her usual immaculate composure completely shattered. "Cassidy, we have a massive security breach in the main lobby," Sarah said, her voice strained. "Your mother and sister just bypassed the lower security desk by tailgating a delivery courier. They are upstairs. They are screaming at the reception staff and refusing to leave." I stood up slowly, smoothing the front of my tailored skirt. "What exactly are they demanding, Sarah?" Sarah swallowed hard. "They are demanding to speak to your manager. Your mother keeps telling the receptionist that you are a low-level consultant having a psychiatric breakdown, and she needs to speak to the boss of the company to get you formally terminated before you damage their reputation." A cold, dark humor settled in my chest. Catherine and Melanie had spent their entire lives underestimating me. They truly believed I was a struggling employee in a cubicle subject to the whims of some imaginary corporate superior. They thought they could waltz into a high-rise in downtown Chicago, throw a wealthy suburban tantrum, and have me discarded like trash. "Call building security," I instructed Gallagher, who was already reaching for his phone. "Have them meet me at the front desk." I walked out of the boardroom and down the long glass-walled corridor toward the main reception area. Long before I saw them, I could hear Catherine's shrill voice echoing off the marble floors. "I do not care if she is in a meeting," Catherine was yelling at my terrified lead receptionist. "You will pull her out right now. And I want the contact information for your human resources director and the president of this firm. My daughter is a severe liability to your operations. She is mentally unstable and currently under investigation for harassing my son-in-law." Melanie stood right beside her, her arms crossed, nodding emphatically. "She needs to be institutionalized," Melanie chimed in, projecting her voice so the entire floor of analysts could hear. "We are trying to protect your company from her delusions. Just bring us the man in charge." I stepped into the expansive lobby, flanked immediately by 3 towering security guards in dark suits. The reception area fell dead silent. The analysts who had been peering over their monitors quickly sat back down, pretending to work while watching the spectacle unfold. Catherine finally spotted me. Her eyes narrowed in vicious triumph. She pointed a manicured finger at my chest. "There she is. I want her packed up and escorted out of this building immediately." I did not raise my voice. I did not yell. I walked slowly toward them, the click of my heels echoing sharply in the quiet room. I stopped 10 feet away, letting the absolute silence stretch until the air felt thick enough to suffocate them. "You are looking for the person in charge, Mother?" I asked, my voice carrying a quiet, lethal weight. "You want to speak to the boss?" Catherine lifted her chin arrogantly. "Yes, I want to speak to the chief executive. You are a danger to yourself and others, Cassidy. You are going to lose your little job today." I looked at Melanie, whose smug smile was slowly beginning to falter as she noticed the deferential way the massive security guards were standing behind me. Then I looked back at Catherine. "I am the CEO." I said every word crisp and unyielding. "I am the founder. I own this firm, and you are trespassing." I watched the reality hit them. It was a physical blow. Catherine's mouth fell open in a silent, grotesque shape of absolute shock. The arrogant certainty drained out of her eyes, replaced by a frantic, scrambling panic as her brain desperately tried to process the fact that the daughter she had treated like dirt was actually a corporate titan holding her financial execution orders. Melanie visibly recoiled, her face turning a sickly shade of gray as she realized she was not standing in front of a vulnerable sibling. She was standing in the epicenter of my empire. "Remove them," I commanded the security team, not breaking eye contact with my mother. "If they resist, have them arrested." The guards moved in immediately, gripping Catherine and Melanie by their arms. For a second, neither woman could even fight back. They were too paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of their own miscalculation. As the guards dragged them toward the glass elevators, Melanie finally found her voice, screeching my name in a hysterical pitch, begging me to listen, begging for a minute to explain. I simply turned my back on them, letting the sound of the elevator doors sliding shut cut off their frantic cries. I walked back towards the executive corridor, my pulse steady, my mind completely clear. The heavy weight of childhood ghosts had just been severed and left on the lobby floor. Gallagher was waiting for me near the entrance to my office. He was holding a thick, legally binding document secured in a blue backing folder. He did not look at the elevators. He kept his eyes strictly on the business at hand. "The 48-hour default window for Terrence is up," Gallagher stated, handing me the heavy file. "We have received no wire transfers. Their accounts are completely empty. Do we seize the family estate?" I looked down at the documents. The deed to the house where I had spent years being pushed aside, minimized and emotionally starved, was now just a piece of paper waiting for my signature. I picked up a silver pen from my desk. I smiled. Execute it. By Sunday morning, the execution was fully underway. Catherine Vanguard had always treated Sundays as her personal coronation. For decades, the sprawling gardens of the family estate in the affluent northern suburbs had served as the ultimate stage for her elite social performances. This particular Sunday brunch was designed to be a masterclass in denial. Less than 48 hours after Terrence had been escorted out of his own gala by federal agents, Catherine had summoned the wealthiest, most influential women in her country club circle to the estate. She needed to control the damage. She needed to look these women in the eye and project an illusion of untouchable generational wealth. The caterers had been setting up since dawn. A lavish buffet of imported cheeses, smoked salmon, and artisanal pastries stretched across the manicured terrace. A harpist played softly near the rose garden. Catherine floated through the crowd of silk-clad socialites, a crystal flute of vintage mimosa in her hand. She wore a pristine ivory linen dress, her face a rigid mask of serene confidence. "It is merely a minor regulatory misunderstanding," Catherine announced loudly to a group of bank executives' wives, her voice dripping with bored dismissal. "You know how aggressively the SEC pursues brilliant tech innovators these days. Terrence's legal team will have the entire matter dismissed by Tuesday. It is barely a blip on our radar." The women nodded, sipping their drinks, their eyes darting around the manicured lawns and evaluating sweeps. They were vultures disguised as friends, waiting to see if the Vanguard carcass was ready to be picked apart. A few feet away, Melanie was failing to uphold the family facade. She looked like a porcelain doll that had been dropped down a flight of stairs. She was hovering near the mimosa station, clutching a glass so tightly her knuckles were white. The dark circles under her eyes could not be masked by premium concealer. Her husband was facing multiple felony charges of wire fraud. Her corporate credit cards had all simultaneously declined the previous afternoon, and her entire identity was dissolving in real time. Catherine glided over to her golden child, keeping her smile fixed for the audience while her eyes burned with toxic fury. "Stop looking like a widow at a funeral, Melanie," Catherine hissed through gritted teeth, her lips barely moving. "Stand up straight. You are a vanguard. We do not show weakness to these people. Drink your mimosa and go talk to the judge's wife about the upcoming charity regatta." Melanie shook her head, her voice trembling. "Mom, Terrence's lawyers stopped returning my calls last night. The accounts are completely locked. I had to pay the caterers this morning with the emergency